I'm Amanda Fancy. I'm the dealer-owner of Gals Home Hardware and Furniture. We've been at this location for about a year. We started in 1848, way back when. This is our 5th location, so we've never have left the town limits. So we're looking to build this location. We had lots of opportunity to potentially look at outside of the town limits, but it was really key for us to be and continue to be a growing business in Bridgewater. Bridgewater, Nova Scotia is unique. We have a beautiful countryside. Our town is 7,500 people, but then, our customer reach is about 45,000. So, we're talking about lots of small communities, hidden treasures. There's huge opportunity here, and I think that it's certainly worthwhile to make the visit, make the call, do some inquiring, because it certainly is somewhere where I think there would be some strong investment opportunities for sure.
My name is Joey Richard. I come from Quebec, Montreal. I've studied opera at the Montreal Conservatoire of Music, so this is where I've learned about Italian. the language and the food. And my passion just became bigger and bigger for food. I've been cooking for 20 years almost. I opened a family business, but the only thing I forgot is that my family is still in Montreal. So I'm like, I'm trying, I make new friends. I'm building this thing, but it is a family business here. My chef is like my brother. His wife is like my sister. So, I recreated a family environment. We do the real recipes, starting from the real ingredients. And for Italian food, what the secret is, few ingredients and very fresh. So each recipe would be like 3-4 ingredients maximum. But it's just the best ingredients and makes it so delicious. If you think that it's impossible to have your own business, I'm the living proof that it is possible. People want us to thrive. We work together. So everybody helps each other. If you want to be part of a community, it is the community to be part of.
My name is Joel Holland. I'm the owner and operator of 902 Athletics. I found the opportunity, started this gym in my parents' garage, and now we are currently in an 8,600 square foot facility. A lot of people come here because of the community. The things that we offer here are different than a normal gym. It's an open atmosphere where you come in, the music's played over the loudspeakers, not in your ears. You don't put earbuds in and just walk around from one machine to the other. You focus on yourself, but at the same time you get to meet new people. We have 3 floors, which we do CrossFit, boot camps, athletic training, and personal training. We have so many other businesses that are growing our economy and feeding into it becoming more populated, a place where people actually stay as opposed to leave. We're growing, we're getting bigger, and a lot of people are on the same push to become a better Bridgewater. I love this place. It's my home, and there is no other place that I would want my business to be.
Good evening, everyone. I'm going to call this regularly scheduled meeting of Bridgewater Town Council to order. It's like there's so many people today. So welcome to everyone who's here. Hey. Are there any additions or deletions to the agenda? Hearing none, can I have a motion to approve the agenda as circulated? Councillor Tanner, seconded by Deputy Mayor Fagier. All those in favor? Motion is carried. Thank you. And we are down to announcements. So there's a couple in there. Proclamations, we don't read out the whole proclamation anymore. Those will be posted on the town's social media feed and on the town's website. So Heart Failure Awareness Week is May 5th to 11th, 2024. And Lyme Disease Awareness Month is the month of May. Both of these very important, and so look for those proclamations to be posted in full on the town's social media, along with additional information regarding both those. It seems Lyme disease season is every season now, but Lyme Disease Awareness Month is the month of May. Announcements. I'm gonna be sharing this throughout the next few days on social media. But Deputy Mayor Fagier and Donna Hatt, who is our Economic Development Officer, and myself participated in the 4th International Network of Michelin Cities Conference down in Anderson, South Carolina. A whirlwind conference of plenaries and information sessions and learning, and then some more learning, and then some more learning. And I know the three of us are still kind of unpacking all the stuff that we learned and saw and heard. So there'll be takeaways that we share throughout the week or the next couple of weeks as we, again, debrief and unpack that. We are also excited to bring an NSCC student, Mercedes McDonald, with us, because there was a student stream for that. So she is a Michelin employee and an NSCC student, and she got to participate in a bunch of plenaries and discussions with university students from around the world, which was quite an opportunity for her and for our community. So we thank the Network of Michelin Cities for hosting that in Anderson, and Terrence, who's the mayor of Anderson, was a fantastic host. One of the most moving things for me is the mayors all had a separate meeting as a member of the executive, and one of the mayors that attended was from Kremenchuk, Ukraine. Took 5 days, did you say 5 days, to get from Ukraine to the United States. This is a city that has been directly hit by Russian bombs and missiles. There was a second mayor that could not leave his city because when he was supposed to depart, it just became all but impossible based on attacks. But Vitaly, who was the mayor of Kremenchuk, gifted us their new stamp for their community. It's probably hard to see, but it is a Ukrainian farmer's tractor pulling a Russian tank, which I thought was, quite fitting, as we've all seen images of their farmers kind of stepping up and doing their part. So it was very difficult as they shared videos of what was their city and now is their city and what they hope their city could be. So we'll share more of that as we go forward. But big thanks to the people of Ukraine for supporting their leadership as they try to travel and share their story. And again, it was fitting that it was the same week that the U.S. gave a whole bunch of aid to Ukraine as well. So I don't know, Deputy Mayor, if you wanted to add to that.
Yeah, it was very enlightening. You got to meet people, like Mayor Mitchell said, from all over the world. Definitely opportunities to network. One exercise that they did was, and I'm trying to think of the gentleman's names, but it was a kind of an art exercise, visual.
Adam, yeah.
Yeah, and so it meant sitting across the table from somebody you didn't know and doing a visual art exercise with them and taking turns. And it taught you a lot about yourself and communicating without words. And you just, you didn't know what you were the end result was going to be with your piece of art. You were just drawing a line, for example, and then they were continuing that line with a different color, a different piece. And then the exercise continued to talk to share your childhood with them. And then, so you had to talk 3 minutes of something about your childhood. The next step was to draw, you had to draw their childhood in 2 minutes in a visual piece. So it really got you thinking, whether you were not a good artist, you still had to come up with something and share the story. So it was a great exercise, and the counselor, Beatrice, she was from Anderson, happened to be sitting across from me. So it was a great way to meet somebody and share an impactful story that they hoped you would continue to engage and communicate with that person later on. So I thought that was a great exercise.
Yeah, there was a whole bunch of those. We toured a community college, university.
Yeah.
A lot of takeaways from those. So
Yeah.
I appreciate the deputy mayor joining me on that, and we'll unpack that. And Donna was right in her element. I could just see you absorbing all the ideas and things that other communities are doing and bringing them home. So perfect. I don't know if anyone has any questions on that. Are there any other announcements from members of council? All right, then we will go down to delegations, and I see our representative from the Farmers Market is here to talk about Food Truck Festival. So I would encourage you to come on down to the microphone.
All right.
Introduce yourself, and yeah, you've got
Stand, sit.
yeah, whatever you feel more
I'm gonna
comfortable with.
sit.
Perfect.
If that's all right.
Yep. And you've got 10 minutes. It doesn't include any questions from us. So.
Not sure I need 10 minutes. I'm exactly 1 week into being a part of the Bridgewater Farmers Market. So they've just thrown me right out here. I'll be acting as the secretary this year. But last year I attended more than enough times to qualify for being on that chamber and whatnot. So the first thing I want to do is give you a little bit of an update on what's been going on with our market. So since it's moved to the arena, we have seen a significant increase in traffic to the market from the 2022 to 2023 season. Almost 20 to 25% across the board in attendance, revenue, and number of vendors. So that's been going really well for the market over there. We found that having the additional in-store area has allowed for expanding from just traditional farmer stuff to having a lot of artisans, and it's been like getting word of mouth. It's good. What we're looking for this week, for now, is we do a partnership with the Nourishing Communities program from the Department of Communities, Culture, and Heritage every year, where they give us money that goes to, what's the word, like a food dependent or, I'm forgetting the phrase. Security? Yeah, it's like food insecurity is what it fights for, is against. And as a result, they give a certain amount of money to that, which can be used in our markets, and we have to contribute a certain amount back into the program to be participants. Every year, we meet this obligation by doing our food truck event, which has been going on for, I don't know exactly how many years, but I know it's been a good long while. But in the past, you have assisted us with this by declaring it a special event and waiving the vending fees for the food trucks. And you've provided power to the town center parking lot in the bandstand area on King Street Court Park. And you've provided portable toilets for us to have the event to meet our commitment for nourishing communities. So this year we are asking that you continue to be, gracious and provide those things for us so we can do that.
Perfect.
I think that's it.
Any questions from council? I know it's been remarkable to see the market grow and grow and grow.
Doing quite well.
Yeah.
We just got it today. I only was able to read about half of it because it's like a 50-page document. We just got the provincial assessment of all of the province's farmers markets for the last decade. It's an analysis from 2013 to 2023, and it shows the growth in markets, the numbers in markets, and stuff like that. And we, in the scope of the 23 different Nova Scotia farmers markets, we're mid-range to high on a lot of counts. It's really interesting. I was very surprised by how many markets you'd think were bigger than us weren't in terms of numbers. And yeah, it's very interesting. So it seems to be doing well.
That's awesome. Councillor Caldwell.
A question not about the food truck party, but about the market. Is there anything that council could do to help foster more food on site, food to eat on site?
There is. We're currently working on a plan. We have a walkthrough meeting with the building on the 30th, where we're going to discuss some of the things and finalize some of the things that we as the market think would work well for us. A few of the ideas are things like if there was a kitchen area inside the building, if that was working, we would have more access. There's electrical issues with the outdoors. We have a lot of vendors, food vendors who need power, and we can't get that to them outdoors. So, so there are some things, but we're going to get a prioritized list in the next month or so, and hopefully you'll hear from us again.
Okay.
It's funny, an article was shared this morning about the value of conferences, as there's a municipality in Nova Scotia who has someone who doesn't really see why people go to conferences. And the farmers market, every year when it starts, always reminds me of the value of conferences, because I was at a planning conference in Halifax where they talked about farmers markets. On the way back, I called Pat Hurdle and said, I don't know anything about farmers markets, but I think you have some connections. And by the time I arrived back in Bridgewater after leaving the city, Patrick had sourced out a number of people who would be the vendors at the farmers market, and maybe 5 weeks later, the first market took place on King Street.
Oh, so a side note, which I completely forgot about, this year marks our 15-year anniversary. So obviously, everyone is invited. We'd like to have everyone come out. We're having cake and complimentary coffee and tea on our opening day. Another thing we've done is we're extending our market hours. We aren't going to be just from 9 to noon. We're going to be from 9 to 1 to encourage more lunchtime people. What we found is that a lot of the people who are traditional shoppers for vegetables and fruits and stuff want to come early. They want to get the best stuff. But now that we have a large artisan base that's happening as well, and a large lunchtime food base that's happening as well, it makes sense to run a little longer so people can take advantage of lunchtime on Saturday. We also are extending our season. Instead of pausing in, I think it was October or late September, and then starting up again for the holiday markets, we are running straight through the holidays. So we have 33 weeks this year, as opposed to, I think the original was 27, 28 weekends of the season. So, and since we had a good night market, we are going to be doing another night market, and we're pairing it with your Autumn Harvest Fest. So hopefully we can cross-pollinate, get some out-of-town people to come in and do both the events.
Fantastic.
So,
That's great.
Love it. Yeah, that's great. Any other questions from council? So I know we normally do not make decisions the same night we receive a presentation, but there is a bit of a deadline for the request for funding. As this has been something that we have funded in the past, I'm wondering if council would indulge. The request is for $2,000 of.
It's approximately $2,000.
Approximately $2,000
Yeah.
of.
That's our
combination
cost to
of-
provide the road closure
road-
and the porta
porta
potties
potties.
and the access to the power connection in the event.
Yeah.
So it's roughly that.
Yep, for the food truck festival.
Yeah.
So I don't know if someone's prepared to make that. Councillor Tim?
I would make that motion that we fully support this fund.
Thank you. Seconded by Deputy
Yep.
Mayor Frazier. Thank you. Any further discussion on that?
question.
Question being called. All those in favor? Those opposed? Motion is carried. Perfect. Thank
Excellent.
you. Thank
All
you so
right.
much.
Thanks so much for hearing me.
Thank you.
You.
And again,
And
thank
we'll see you at the market opening day, right?
for sure. You had me at cake. And thank you to council. Again, we don't normally make decisions at the night we receive a presentation, but this request has come multiple times before. So something we've supported in the past. Okay, our next delegation is, Joey is here from La Caseta to give us a presentation or discuss the Sidewalk Cafe bylaw. Come on down, Joey. Looking sharp. Just a reminder, you have 10 minutes, but that doesn't include any questions from council.
It's not going to take 10 minutes. It's going to be very quick. So I have a patio. Obviously, it's the only patio that has food. So the reason why I've asked for my patio to be 6 feet high was because it's in the middle of the street. So imagine yourselves, you are sitting there, you have food in front of you, and there's cars going by. So obviously, this is why I asked for 6 feet high, and the top is only 2 feet of fake foliage. That is something that is debatable if I could take it off or keep it. I would be willing to take it off, but the 4 feet, if I have to redo my patio, which costs me $20,000 plus tax, is not even thinkable for me to do. First of all, because I've opened my business January 2020, 2 months later, everything was closed down. I was kicked out of where I was because they decided that they didn't like where I was. They didn't want a restaurant there after 2 months, 3 months. And I was like, okay, I gotta move. Called David, and it took 5 minutes, and then I had another place where I went 6 feet bigger, 6 times bigger, sorry about that. And my business had been growing and growing and growing. But all of that, my business is through COVID, through hard times. I am not looking to make money at this time. That is obvious. This is why I invested everything I had into trying to lift up Bridgewater, not by being pulled down. So then I've seen that there was a problem with one complaint. We're talking about one, which is my neighbor, which is the neighbor that's leaving town because they don't like the town. They don't like their business in this town. It doesn't work for them, which is fine. If my business wasn't working, I would try to go somewhere else. But that was the only complaint. And from that complaint, I would have to change everything that I was totally legal to do my patio this way. I was accepted not once, but 2 years in a row. First year, I didn't have my insurance, but the same plans, I didn't do nothing. The plans were there. I asked, can I apply for a second year? Same plans were there, didn't do nothing else. That was accepted a second time. Once it was built, then it's like, oh, no, you got to change that. That is not the way it works usually. Anyway, I am willing to probably take off the 2 feet high from the foliage. Now, where I was going to ask as if it would be possible to be grandfathered. Then since it's something that we ask to have each year to apply for a new permit, I'm kind of hostage of changing those plans every year. So which I was asking myself, I wanted to make a point. So my point, if you give me a second. I don't know if I shall continue. But my point is, I'm still presentable. But is it acceptable? Thank you very much. Your turn to ask questions.
Thank you, Joey. Does anyone have any questions? I know this is on our agenda for a second reading. Councilor Conklin.
So Joe, you're saying, so the total cost of the patio is
$20,000.
$20,000? So if you were to scale it back to the 4 feet, any big cost that you would?
No.
Okay, what about, so is a 3 foot?
I have to redo everything. Honestly, I have to redo everything. It's because, I'm going to explain why. Because there's metal, first of all, on the outside. So this has to be redone. I have to reinstall everything. Then my the benches is the barrier. So if I cut this, then it's not the same distance because obviously the seats are going sideways. There's an angle. So I'm going to have to cut this, redo everything. Might as well just scrap the whole thing and redo another one. which I don't think that would be proper, seriously.
Yeah, so it'd be like fair to say you'd be looking at another maybe 20 grand, 15?
If it's not 20, at least 15. Because I don't like things that are done just cheap. Seriously, I like to, you look at my restaurant, I am not going to put ropes as a patio, obviously. And the ones that really made me decide to move, well, not to move here, but to open a business, there's two businesses that were inspirational for me because we share the same customers, which is obviously King Street Brewery and Fancy Pants. We share the same customers. We are proud of our products. When people come in my patio, they say, it feels like we're not in Bridgewater. Not because they don't want to be in Bridgewater, but it feels like they're somewhere else, and it's nice to have a kind of a vacation. Exactly when I go to King Street, it's not that I want to go back to Montreal, but I feel like I'm back in a place like Montreal, which is the same type of presentation. So I'm trying to give a point of view of, kind of vacation when you come to my place. People like it. The ambiance is different. I have a pianist. I do not want my music to be played anything same as anywhere else. So there's no rock music. It's always like either Italian, jazz. It's different. And this is what makes us completely different from the others, and that's why I have a success. That's why they have success. That's why Fancy Pants has success, because we are different. We make a difference in Bridgewater, and we do, the three of us, we attract a lot of tourists. And I hope that this is what you guys want to do.
Councilor McDonald.
You're talking about the difference between other patios that we have in town and yours is that you're serving food. So I was very lucky to spend some time in Portugal recently, tons of sidewalk patios. They're all open to the street. And one thing that I really noticed was that people walking down the street will stop and chat, they'll join. It's a very social, interactive experience. Do you feel that being open takes away, or are you worried about, what is the concern specifically?
We're on the main street.
Right.
If I was in any other street, which wouldn't have as much as cars passing by, it would be different. But I am in the middle of the street, the main street. So this is why I really insisted on having it this high. And I asked to make sure that it was accepted, and I was, 100% within the laws.
Right.
So.
So the 4 feet that you're doing 4 feet this year, I think you said?
Well, it's still 6. The thing is, I can take off the foliage, which is 2 feet high.
Right.
But I still have the wooden top, which if in case it rains or something, I can, close it down or whatever, and then just leave it open, because we know that last year I had to take off everything, cut down my, the sails that I had on top because of a very bad weather. Last year was absolutely awful. So I just had to cut them down. So this year I'm trying to come up with something that I can remove very easily. And, but that's why I just keep that wooden part, but it doesn't block the view at all.
But you could work with the 4 feet, is what you're saying?
I could work
Okay.
with the 4 feet.
No.
Not that it is something like that it is, obviously I'm like, yeah, let's take it off. If I have to, if this is what would make a compromise, I'm willing to make the compromise. But the 4 feet, if I have to redo this, might as well scrap it all down.
Councilor Copeland.
So the top of your backrest on the benches, that's approximately the same 4-foot
Yeah.
level, more or
Yeah.
less. Okay.
That's why the 2
Yeah.
feet top, I can just take the foliage off. And I mean, they cost me like $50 each. I have 8 of them. It's not that bad. This is like something I can take off. It's just that it's nice, but there's no purpose other than just blocking the view from the cars passing by, and that's it. I can change that.
Okay, any other questions? Again, I know this is further along on our agenda tonight. Where is it? Way down there. No. No, it's not that far down the agenda. You're waiting around. You don't have to wait like 2 hours, 2.5 hours. Any other questions from Councilor Tanner?
Assuming we hit 7.3 and we approve that particular bylaw, is there any mechanism for La Caseta to apply for an exemption or an exception to that particular component?
So my understanding from talking to the staff that administer that bylaw, that the application came in prior to the amendments, first reading, so the 4 feet would be able to be maintained for this season. Next season would be the issue. So there's a couple options council has when we get to that.
Okay.
You can look at amending it to change the number now, or you can see what 4 feet looks like over the season and amend the bylaw in the fall if you feel like the sight lines are, the intent is the sight lines,
Okay.
right? So that those sight lines on the street are maintained. The 4 feet, you can change the bylaw then.
Other questions? Cool. All right. I appreciate you coming and speaking to us.
It's
I know
been a pleasure to make a point.
I'm glad that you stopped and dressed where you did. I like your socks.
I come from Montreal. You gotta know I'm French.
I did catch Tiffany out of the corner of my eye, just thinking, okay.
I was worried where that was
You
going.
didn't put her into this.
I was willing to go all the way.
And my concern is that I believe you. Yeah. No, I do want to say, it's not always easy to come to speak to council about something that, there's a bylaw on we're dealing with tonight. There's some challenges, as we've heard from Joey, so I always applaud people coming and speaking their mind before council, because it can be nerve-wracking, and I think I've said this many times. I'm fine sitting here. I'm terrified if I have to go around and address council from that. I don't know what it is. It must be that microphone. I don't know. So I appreciate both our presenters coming before council, so thank you. Are there any other delegations that wish to speak to council on any other items? No? Okay. So we are down to new business, and I think Ed Nix is here to talk about insurance coverage. You're going to keep your clothes on, right?
Yes. Okay. Yeah, I didn't come quite as prepared as he did. So, and I'm not from Montreal. Although when you go to Montreal and you travel and you start things pop on your Facebook feed, you're like, is this a thing? Yeah. So in Montreal, yeah. I just wanted to say as well, we had 2 sessions earlier today with staff. So super well attended. Really great questions from staff. And one thing I'll mention is that the town is really quite ahead of other municipalities of a similar size in the province. You have made a number of steps in risk mitigation and risk management efforts. So the town is certainly much further ahead than other units in the province, both ones that I represent and ones that I don't. So I'm just going to go through this part really quickly. So BFL, we're 100% Canadian. We're employee-owned. We're not publicly traded. There's over 1,300 employees across Canada. In Atlantic, we have Halifax, Amherst, and Tracadie-Shiloh in New Brunswick. I'm just going to skip through that. So risk management, I thought that was a great graphic, although I wouldn't try to balance that myself. So and this is where we're dealing with staff on where do we see risk coming from. As a municipality, there's really no limit as to the risks that the town may face, whether it's streets, sidewalks, sewer, water, public works, parks, recreation. It's rather limitless. And working with staff, we're working on mitigating those risks as well as contracts. Real property assets, including inspections and reviews. And then liability is still a key focus on what we do. So we still see liability claims increasing, the costs are escalating, as well as liability claims can be unpredictable. We try to keep them managed, and certainly the town has made a number of great efforts in that way that we talked about earlier. And the other thing that a number of members of council might be familiar with is joint and several liability. Ontario has tried to introduce legislation as the only jurisdiction in Canada to move this forward. It's still a work in progress. But essentially, the concept is municipality may be deemed to be 1% liable or 5% liable for a liability suit. But if the other individuals, whether it was a contractor or, for example, a paving contractor, and there was an issue with the road, someone was injured, but if the amount of the claim was so large that it blew through that contractor's insurance, the municipality could still be deemed to be 1% liable, but end up paying the majority of the claim. So this is the concern when we're seeing these large verdicts. Again, in Atlantic, we're still fortunately fairly insulated. We haven't seen the increase in lawsuits that we're seeing in Ontario. However, our population is changing with much more immigration, which is great for the province. We are seeing more Ontario-esque issues. So again, it's increasing. The town isn't there yet, but again, Bridgewater's growing. There's a lot of great proposals on the horizon. And municipalities are seen as having deep pockets. Again, the money tree, which we know doesn't exist, but in the public's eye, it's like, well, the government has money. Give me more programs, give me more support. And risk management is about reducing or limiting that exposure. So risk management on a day-to-day basis, often an overused word. But again, it's our attempt to minimize claims, whether that is reducing the frequency, reducing severity, or if a claim does happen, how do we mitigate that payout? I think, Kim, this deck will be available for council. So I'm not going to read through every single point. I think a lot of you here have reviewed this in the past. But again, it's us to identify where is the risk, what is it, where is it, and then we look at bringing us in and saying, okay, how do we manage it? Can we transfer the risk? Do we avoid it? If the risk is so severe, do we even engage? And I often tease recreation, who I'm throwing daggers in my back right now, but it's all good. So again, and looking at the techniques that are available. And we look at risk control and risk financing. So risk control, we talked about avoidance. If someone has come with a proposal, and I jokingly said, the zip line across the LaHave River, although it was oddly enough quite a few years ago, with Modal, we did a tour of the trail over there, where the railway lines are behind Best Western. And I said, this would be an interesting spot for a zip line. She said, don't laugh. And the idea has been floated. This was a long time ago. But again, that is such an extreme example of why would you even think about it? But the idea was floated. But that would be an example of, no, let's not go there. And then we look at loss prevention. So streets and sidewalks, again, plowing, salting. Do we have records, record keeping, and whatnot? So again, I did talk about the zip lining. The fire apparatus, this was an interesting one because this is real. I got a call, this was not in the town. A contractor called the fire department asking to use a fire apparatus, a ladder truck, to install windows on a third-story building. So essentially it's like, yes, we're going to take a vehicle out of service to use a ladder truck to install windows. So that was an example of why would you do that? Again, but it's a question. It's Nova Scotia. We kind of get interesting questions at times. And park and playground equipment, and I splash my spelling there, known dangerous state. And again, prevention. This is all about how do we prevent that proverbial bus coming down the road after us. So whether that is inspections, checklists, things like that. Community groups and requests to be added to the town's insurance, for example, as that'll often take the case, or are these valid committee of council? Volunteers and staff serving the public. What are the policies and procedures and protocols? Do you screen volunteers as you would staff members? Reduction really is the key part that we focus on a lot of the time with the town. So this is when we know a claim has happened, it has occurred. We talked with staff today about the timeliness of reporting a claim. the sooner we know, the more information we have, the quicker we can act on that. Then we're going to look at your documentation, what records are available. So if a slip and fall happened on King Street at 9:30 a.m., but the salt and sand crew and the plow went through at 9:15, that's great. We can say, look, the town has been conducting its own due diligence. We have plow crew there. The salt doesn't have time to melt. But again, having that information available enables us to deal with those. I'm not going to talk about separation duplication. Risk financing and transfer. This is a big push, or not a big push, but a big discussion today with RFPs as well as single source contracts. The town has standardized and has for a number of years, and really this is where the town has been a leader in that process, and having very specific, very detailed, and standardized engagement contracts. So that would include your hold harmless and indemnity clauses, very specific insurance requirements, all with the intent of, if I'm purchasing a service from contractor X, and that contractor X is doing work on town property, I want to make sure that you have insurance, that if you cause a loss, it's your insurance that pays first, not the town's. Because again, we're engaging you, we're paying you. So we want to make sure that we see those in there. And the town, as I say, is doing a fantastic job that way in making sure that we do look at those agreements. We look at certificate compliance. And I'm not sure if I had it in this slide deck or not, but on average, we see about an 80% failure rate on the certificates that come in to procurement. So of all the certificates of insurance that are required to be filed with the town, on average, it's about an 80% failure rate. So they're missing information. It's a to whom it may concern certificate. It's out of date. The name of the contractor is different than who's on the certificate. It's missing coverage. So there again, what Bridgewater is doing is again, far and above what a number of other communities are doing, with the whole goal of why should the town pay for claims that it didn't cause, and it's paying someone else to perform work on its behalf. This was also something we had talked about this afternoon with staff. Who's involved in risk management? Everybody. So I mentioned to staff, same with volunteers. We all become blinded by our familiarity with what's going around in town. I joke that you say, well, I didn't know that building was blue. And to which, somebody says, it's been that way for 10 years. But it's the same way with risk. Because if you go to the same playground for the past 10 years, you might not have noticed the gradual decline in perhaps the wood skirting around the play structure. So if staff are out there and you notice, like, hey, I notice it's starting to look a little dodgy, who should I talk to about that? So it really engages everyone in the town to speak to parks or public works. Again, having your eyes open as to what's going on in town, and then not be afraid to say, like, somebody else will take care of it. So certainly engaging with staff to say, you're the eyes and ears of the town. Whether, it could be a claim on a Saturday afternoon. You heard someone talking about it, Tim Hortons. Bring that to management. So again, the eyes and ears, whether it includes staff, volunteers, council members. It's important that we're working on this together. And then understand that risk management is never, ever done. You build new structures, you build, the expansions to the town. So it's a living and breathing process and document. Okay, I did have it in here. So the town, as I mentioned, is leading the charge. I received an email a couple months ago from Annalise that was sent from the town of Amherst, who is not a client of mine. But again, that was sent to a number of other communities saying, hey, we've got pushback from a vendor saying that they've never provided insurance before. Why should we do it? I reached out to the town saying, this is why. I gave them a list of points, like this is what you need to give to your vendor, saying here's why you want it. Again, it's reasonable. It doesn't cost the vendor any money. If they already have insurance, we're asking for proof, valid proof. But at the end of the day, the town of Amherst was paying for that service. So it was a great conversation, but this is something the town has been doing for a number of years that others are still catching up to. So again, kudos to, to finance, because again, it's something that is mitigating future loss and just having that consistency in place. We do review your contracts. We do review the certificates. So some weeks we could have 10, 15 different certificates. But this is why when we talk about a failure rate, most of the issue with failure rate is generally the contractor didn't share the contract with the broker, or the broker is not familiar in dealing with a complex organization like the town. They're used to just give me a copy of your policy. Documentation, again, 2024 was really starting to look like a pretty ouchy season in terms of slip and falls. But again, there's been efforts made with the town with far faster response times, photographs, logs, incident reporting, which definitely benefits us in protecting interests of the town. That way we're not dealing with incidents that are again, timeliness is how we can best defend you against slip and fall claims. And the town, again, is light years ahead of where it was before. And something that we recommend in addition to, better documentation is, in the future, look at GPS tracking. Again, is it mandatory? No, but it's something to think about down the road. Because again, as the town grows, the town's expanding. There's more infrastructure, there's more people. The incidence of claims are going to be that much more prevalent. So just getting ahead of that curve. Because it'll happen, but it's just something to have in looking into the future. External risks. This is something that I know some of us around the table here have talked about before, is outside community groups. And really where we're getting here is committees of council. But before I get there, is when council members, if you're ever asked to sit on non-municipal boards, we always still recommend do your due diligence first. Even as a private citizen, if you say, I'm going to volunteer on XYZ board, do your due diligence of that organization. A lot of organizations either do not have insurance, they don't have the proper type of insurance. If you were to volunteer in an organization that caters to children or adults at risk, do they have abuse protocols? Do they have staff screening, volunteer screening? Again, if you're sitting on the board of directors for that organization, if there's an allegation of abuse, you're the board of directors. Whether you knew or didn't know, the trouble is that you're in that firing line. So while definitely we all want to be engaged with the community, do your due diligence first to not expose yourself. And the same thing would be with council, moving out as a council member, sitting on a board. Do your due diligence first before you volunteer. You may be surprised at how well run the organization is, which is great. Or in other times you realize wow, they've got some room to go. But again, protect yourselves by asking those questions. Committees of council. So when we're asked to say, well, can we insure this organization or this group? Unless it meets all the definitions there, the answer is always no. So unless the town has absolute control over it, it's created by council, it reports to council, council has control of its budget and operations, it is not a committee of council in our eyes, and we don't insure it. So unless it meets those definitions, it is not a creation of the municipality, and it should have its own insurance. But there again, from the town of Bridgewater, when you're thinking about the police service, the fire service, the public service commission, the museum board, they're all committees of council. There's no question. It's a service group that comes to you and said, look, we're a playground community or a playground action committee. We want to create a playground. Well, how do you handle that? Do you want it to be a committee of council where you're trying to wrangle with a small community group, or do you want to have some sort of management agreement, in which case you're parceling that risk off? So certainly over at Modal, there's been a number of cases where they've done that. There's a lot of work in the community there, but it's a matter of how much control do you want, how many headaches do you want, or do you want to parcel that out under a management agreement? So in terms of, you know, how am I doing on time? Tight? Okay. So when we talk about obligations, insurance, and we're here to pay for claims the town is legally obligated to pay. You may feel you may be morally obligated, but insurance is dealing with legal obligations. So to that, you can apologize that if a person had a sewer backup or if a tree fell on their property, you can say, look, I'm sorry that happened. Well, it's your tree. Okay. But my question back to, and I do get these phone calls. It's like, yeah, our tree fell on the house. Like, what do I do? I was like, it's not your problem, but it's our tree. But did you know it was a problem tree? Did you know it was rotten and ready to fall down? In which case, from an insurance perspective, you are not legally obligated for the damage to that house or business or car. Trees fall. If the town was responsible for all the trees on town property, do you have the capability to inspect every tree every year and do tree sanitation? The answer is no. So there is no legal obligation on the town. Now, if that person wrote into the town and said, look, this tree's going to fall down, and that was silence, and they wrote you another month later, that's different. But so the important part of it is, and we've said this to staff as well, is, you know, don't comment on insurance, don't admit liability. And don't mention, oh yeah, that happened 15 other times on that street. Don't do that, please. And the most important part here is never write a check that we're not going to cash. So in other words, saying, oh yeah, we'll pay for that. And then we're like, you know, but we're not liable, so we're not going to pay it. And that goes to Kim, I guess. But it's one of those scenarios that it's always be very careful. It's fine to apologize. But if in doubt, just reach out to staff and say, like, yeah, I feel really bad about this, but where do we stand? So it's always best to ask the question, even though you can feel terrible for the person. You know, and if anything else, blame insurance, because people don't like us anyway, and that's okay. So social media is actually the last slide. Again, we're not saying don't use social media. Totally the opposite. There's some, and much of this is excerpted from Municipal World about, you know, the benefits of social media as council members. So the biggest part is being, you know, knowing your audience, knowing the sort of temperature of what's going on. So the example I gave us this afternoon is council's meeting tonight, a staff member posts something tomorrow completely unaware of what's going on in the chambers tonight. But somebody could say, oh, well, those two are linked, so I'm going to run with that. So just there again, just being aware of what the posts could mean, or if, you know, I'm really good at being sarcastic, but in an email I'm writing to staff, I'm always very aware. My email can be FOIPOP. But the trouble is, I don't have to FOIPOP something that's on Facebook or Twitter or TikTok. It's in the public sphere. Organizational standards, and there again, just looking at what are the communication policies of the town. And the biggest part is training. You know, again, if you're interviewed by a member of media, if council members have had that training, that's the kind of training you're going to follow into social media. The same sort of like, would you have said that if you're being interviewed? Being aware of what, you know, what you're putting out there in social media. Because again, the benefits of social media are huge. Reaching the community, and we're definitely not saying don't. It's a matter of just being aware of what you're saying. There's so many pitfalls, and once you've said it, it's too late. It's right or wrong, it's out there. But again, that's a really good publication. But certainly, we recommend that, you know, definitely social media is a good way to go, but just be aware. That's as tight as I can get for time. Any questions?
Questions from members of council? Councillor Thorburn.
Not a question, but I know as fire chief, you got lots of interviews, and they would say off the record. There's no such thing as off the record. Once you say it, you can't take it back, so you got to be very careful what you say.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. And that's the challenge. Even if it's not written.
Yeah.
if you have an audience of any kind, yeah, it's hard to take it back.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Other questions from staff or from council rather? Or staff? No?
We had our go.
You had your
Wonderful.
go already. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you so
That's
much.
great. Thank you so much. Thank you. All right, as we move along, we have the minutes of March 25th, regular council meeting, as well as April 2nd, special council meeting, and April 8th, regular council meeting, and budget approval. Any errors or omissions with those?
I would move, we approve.
Thank you. Moved by Councilor Thorburn that we approve the minutes, seconded by Councilor McDonald. All those in favor? Motion is carried. Perfect. Thank you. And we are down to planning items and information report on the Energy Poverty Task Force.
Hi.
Hi, how are you? Oh. Oh. You know what, we can do, you know what, why don't we do the Sidewalk Cafe one first, if you want? If it's up on the screen? It is on the screen. Do you want to do that now? And then that way we don't have... Sorry. I was waiting until you sat down, Santa. Yeah, just because we do have a delegation that's waiting for the outcome of this probably, so perfect. So we'll go down, with council's indulgence, we'll go down to second and final reading of the Sidewalk Cafe bylaw. Floor is yours.
Okay, good evening, Mayor, Council. I'm here to present the proposed amendments to the Sidewalk Cafe bylaw. In the March 25th council meeting, staff introduced an application proposing text amendments to the Sidewalk Cafe bylaw. The amendments aim to address identified shortcomings, particularly in design section, which have been highlighted since last spring. An approved Sidewalk Cafe on King Street in April 2023 garnered significant public attention, prompting interest from Town Council. In our discussion, we honed in on two critical aspects, the enclosure and overall appearance. A major concern voiced was the height of the public barrier and its impact on the streetscape. Responding to the Town Council's direction, our team conducted a thorough review of the existing Sidewalk Cafe bylaw to identify, assess, and address potential issues and deficiencies. In the image on the right, we see a Sidewalk Cafe on King Street illustrating a notable visual obstruction on the public sidewalk, which is a primary concern. In contrast, the image on the left showcases an alternative design for a King Street Sidewalk Cafe where an appropriately open public barrier allows for uninterrupted visual sightlines for pedestrians. Our discussion will emphasize key areas such as the height, material, and transparency percentage of the public barriers. As shown, the Sidewalk Cafe on the left preserves visual connectivity with the surrounding public sidewalk, while the one on the right lacks this feature due to solid barriers. Although these barriers provide privacy for the cafe area, they hinder the view of the rest of the public sidewalk. Hence, ensuring transparency in Sidewalk Cafe barriers has become a primary for our staff, aiming to integrate it into the design section of the relevant bylaw. Our team made addressing design concerns regarding sidewalk cafes and temporary sidewalks a top priority. We initiated this process by compiling a thorough discussion paper on Sidewalk Cafe design, leveraging best practices, case studies, and guidelines from various cities with a specific focus on Nova Scotian towns to grasp existing regulations. Drawing from our research, we developed a comprehensive list of pertinent features and standards. This analysis formed the drafting of proposed text amendments aimed at addressing concerns while preserving the vitality and integrity of public spaces. Here's a breakdown of the sections of the existing Sidewalk Cafe bylaw to which the proposed amendments will likely apply. This includes definitions, application site plan requirements, sidewalk use and temporary sidewalks, public barrier design, awnings, access, lighting, and removal of the sidewalk cafe fixtures. At this juncture, I aim to provide a comprehensive overview of the proposed amendments. In this context, staff has proposed a new definition for temporary sidewalk within the definition section, section 3, to enhance clarity. This proposed addition defines temporary sidewalk as a sidewalk not permanently affixed to the ground, constructed to accommodate the minimum required sidewalk width in instances where obstruction occurs on the elevated public sidewalk. Within the site plan requirements, section 5, lighting has been incorporated for application purposes. Accordingly, under the proposed amendment, the site plan submitted by the applicant must outline the designated area of the proposed sidewalk cafe along with the intended location and arrangement of planters, awnings, tables, chairs, barriers, lighting, and all other fixtures. This plan should be presented in relation to both the elevated public sidewalk or adjacent town-owned property and the indoor food or beverage establishment associated with the sidewalk cafe bylaw. The proposed amendments to section 14 aim to provide further clarification to the latter part of the section. Specifically, we have endeavored to specify that the term sidewalk pertains to the temporary sidewalk. Additionally, we have included measurements in feet alongside metric scales to enhance comprehension. Emphasis has also been placed on ensuring the temporary sidewalk meets the requirement minimum width to adequately address and maintain accessibility needs and objectives. In the temporary sidewalk section, section 15, 3 amendments have been proposed. These include addressing gaps on the temporary sidewalk surface, clarifying the transition angle between the public sidewalk and the temporary sidewalk, and ensuring that the construction of the temporary sidewalk does not obstruct any street drainage systems. In this context, under Clause A, if a temporary sidewalk extends over on street parking, 2 conditions must be met. Firstly, no accessible parking space should be adversely affected, and secondly, the design of the related temporary sidewalk must meet the approval of both the town engineer and the development officer. Furthermore, we have incorporated the imperial scale in clauses B, E, and the newly proposed clause F for enhanced clarity and ease of understanding. As a new addition, staff proposes a clause stipulating that temporary sidewalk surface material should not contain any gaps greater than 13 milliliters or half an inch. This measure aims to enhance safety for individuals using canes by preventing them from getting stuck in these gaps. Another proposed clause dictates that the transition from public sidewalk to the temporary boardwalk should maintain an angle no greater than 45 degrees. This adjustment aims to provide a smoother pathway transition for pedestrians, particularly those using wheelchairs, as they move from the public sidewalk to the temporary sidewalk adjacent to the sidewalk cafe. The third proposed clause addresses potential street drainage blockage caused by the temporary sidewalk. To mitigate this concern, the proposed clause mandates that the temporary sidewalk must be constructed in a manner that does not impede or disrupt the street drainage system. The proposed amendments to Section 17 seeks to enhance clarity regarding barrier height requirements. Under this amendment, the height of the public barrier is stipulated to be no less and no more than 1 meter or 3 feet, emphasizing its significance in maintaining adequate visual sightlines for pedestrians and sidewalk cafe patrons. Additionally, measures have been taken within this section to ensure clarity by providing height specifications in both meters and feet. Within Section 18, our staff presents a new proposal concerning the transparency of public barriers. Specifically, we advocate for a minimum transparency requirement of 50% for these barriers, ensuring the preservation of unobstructed visual sightlines. Consequently, it will be mandated to maintain at least 50% transparency on all sides of the Sidewalk Cafe's public barriers. The addition of an awning section addresses the allocation of space for awnings within sidewalk cafes. These proposed additions provide comprehensive guidelines regarding the design and height specification for awnings, which must be adhered to during the submission of the sidewalk cafe applications. Upon closer examination of this proposed section, it comprises 3 clauses. Firstly, it stipulates that awnings may be permitted but are restricted to the width of the associated sidewalk cafe. Secondly, it mandates that the design of awnings must align with the aesthetic and architectural characteristics of the sidewalk cafe and the surrounding area. Finally, it establishes that the height of awnings should not be less than 3 meters or 10 feet to prevent obstruction along the accessible temporary sidewalk route and the sidewalk cafe areas. In the proposed amendment to the access section, there is notable adjustment. The minimum required width for unobstructed access to buildings would increase from 1 meter to 1.2 meters. This change means that owners must ensure a minimum width of 1.2 meters or 4 feet instead of 1 meter for an unobstructed, barrier-free walkway extending from an elevated public sidewalk to the food and beverage establishment. This addition provides clarity and underscores that an unobstructed walkway encompasses the entire distance from an elevated public sidewalk or temporary sidewalk to the food and beverage establishment. Staff have introduced a provision in the lighting section stipulating that lighting must not cause glare on adjacent properties. Accordingly, sidewalk cafe lighting should not project onto or create glare on neighboring properties. A proposed addition to the removal sidewalk cafe fixtures introduces a new provision requiring the restoration of the streets, sidewalks, and municipal property to their original condition at the end of the season. The new proposed clause mandates that once the sidewalk cafe is removed for the season, the street, sidewalk, and municipal property must be restored to their original condition, subject to approval by the development officer or their designate. To conclude, it's important to emphasize that the proposed amendments will not impact the current sidewalk cafe's applications for this season, of which 2 completed applications have been received. The revised bylaw will not be effective for approximately 1 month should Council approve the changes this evening. Any applications received prior to the effective new date would be administered through the current bylaw. However, the proposed modifications to the existing sidewalk cafe bylaw will be taken into account during the evaluation of the current applications. In other words, during meetings and interactions with the applicants, the development officer will discuss these proposed changes and advise the applicants to consider them this season and for future seasons. This means that applicants do not need to make significant changes to their sidewalk cafe fixtures for this season. In light of this, staff has identified the recommended option for Town Council to proceed with the second reading and final consideration of the proposed amendments to Chapter 201 Sidewalk Cafe Bylaw. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Sana. Questions from members of Council? Councilor McDonald.
Is an umbrella considered the same as an awning and would be required to be 10 feet high?
Yes.
Okay.
Councilor Conklin.
Section 21, where we're talking about the width of access to the establishment. What's the current width of our sidewalks?
Could you please repeat your question?
The width of our sidewalks, what is the width of our?
The current one
Yeah.
is 1 meter.
It is 1 meter, okay.
Yep.
So we are looking at increasing the minimum width from 1 meter to 1.2?
Yes, Jim.
Unobstructed barrier-free walkway. Okay. Okay, thanks. Another question? So, do we have any idea with respect to the businesses that have had sidewalk cafes in the past, how they'd be impacted with a lot of these proposed changes, with the exception of La Caseta, I guess, because we kind of got a feeling for what the impact would be with them, but like with King Street, Beer, Firkenstein's, whoever else.
Are you specifically talking about like the section 21, like the access?
Oh, I'm sorry, no, any
Like
of
the
these
whole-
sections, yeah.
Yeah, I assume that like the new proposed changes will be affected to like all current sidewalk cafes, but not for this season, but from next season.
For next season, okay. Do we know how many or okay, let's take King Street Beer, for example. With these proposed changes, would King Street Beer have to undergo any modifications to their existing setup for next season?
I assume that would be yes.
Yeah? Okay, and I'm guessing that we'd communicate these changes to the businesses that have applied already for permits for this season?
Yeah.
Sort of, kind of? No?
I would like just to invite Nick, to consider this specific question.
Yes, Councilor Conklin. So we do have applications in for this year. These, as Sands mentioned, so these won't apply to those applications, although we'll have that conversation with them. As far as the other two sidewalk cafes that have been on King Street for the past few years, there may be one or two of these amendments regarding the angle. Okay, I'll back up. King Street Beer, based on the applications from prior years, I don't see any real change required per the design that they had submitted previously with these new amendments. There may be something there with the gap between the deck boards on the temporary elevated sidewalk, but we would have to look at that a little bit more closely to be sure. They certainly aren't significant. For Firkenstein, there would be a change to, it's the angle actually shown on that slide there. It's the angle for which the temporary sidewalk adjoins to the permanent sidewalk. We would have to take a closer look at that, but in both cases, the changes would not be significant to either of those two sidewalk cafes based on prior year's applications. I know this year with King Street Beer, the application looks a little bit different, and I haven't vetted that yet. I haven't reviewed that yet, but I expect it to be much the same as previous years, just a different scale.
And those changes
Okay,
are to
thanks.
deal with accessibility standards, am I correct? In terms of the width that Councillor Conklin was talking about, going from 1 to 1.2, and those are
Yes.
for accessibility, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah.
Okay, Councillor McDonald.
So 3 feet, where did that come from? I think you said best practices, but where did they get 3 feet
Based
from?
on, it's based on like the research that we had specifically in accessibility standards that we have currently.
How does that impact accessibility, the height of the?
Are you talking about if it's about the
height,
barrier?
the
Yes.
3 foot height, yeah.
Yes, it's the height is like, because the current one that we have, it's 1 meter, but it's not emphasizing on like the 1 meter. So we just wanted just to kind of like have it constant exactly 1 meter. So the only changes is just about like the word at least, and then no more and no less than. We're just the number that we want just to keep it.
Right, I get that we're trying to be consistent and solidify a specific height, but why that one?
It's just based on the standards, like accessible standard. This number comes from that standard. So the rationale behind that,
Is it a
I'm not
document?
really. Like it's the Canada, the accessible standards of Canada. This is what I use.
Okay, so in the accessibility standards for Canada, it says that any barrier around a sidewalk cafe should be no more than 3 feet
No,
high?
we don't have like specifically this sentence on that, but because it just talked about, for example, outdoor place, or we don't have any specific standard for
Right.
sidewalk cafes itself in it, no. We just did a lot of review of different guidelines, and we used different guidelines and different bylaws from other towns.
If I may, and that's the key. It was in the jurisdictional scan mostly, so I can't comment on the accessibility part to it, but with respect to the public barrier, the way it's written right now, it just says it shall be 1 meter in height. And so, as development officer, if I'm interpreting that, that means a minimum 1 meter in height, so it can be higher, which was the case with the previous sidewalk when it was approved, sidewalk cafe when it was approved. So, what staff did was we looked at other jurisdictions. So, as Santa said, and there were other considerations made, but also the direction that was provided to staff was to make that clear. To make that determinative, so that there wasn't that interpretation that could be made that it could be higher than 3 meters, rather that it be 3 feet, 1 meter. That it be determinatively 1 meter in height as the requirement. So that's what staff ended up doing. We did some research around that to make sure that it was best practice and that it was that the way that other bylaws read, and that's how we came to just that, no more, no less than 1 meter in height, very clear, very determinative.
Okay, thanks.
Councillor Conklin.
Yes, so just keeping with that, Nick, so 17.1 public barrier, so for the proposed change, 17.2, you're quoting 1 meter, but also in brackets there you have 3 feet. So I'm not sure if that's going to pose a problem, because what are we talking, like 0.3 of a foot, I guess, 3.3 feet in a meter, I don't know.
3.2. So the bylaw shall be read in metric.
Okay.
The imperial that's in parentheses is for reference sake. So it sometimes isn't perfect. It is a little dangerous at times as well. But it does help in conversations with people. So when administering the bylaw, it would be a 3.2 foot requirement.
Councillor Dorman.
Yeah, we just had our insurance in here. So, under this scenario, who is liable for that temporary sidewalk? And if there were actually an incident by a patron in that area, is it the town? Is it the property owner? Who's going to pay the insurance claim?
So the bylaw requires proof of insurance, so
Insurance.
a certificate of insurance naming the town additionally assured and held harmless. So that is a requirement of the application process to provide that certificate of
So
insurance.
it's well documented on who's responsible?
Correct.
Okay, yeah, thank you.
Other questions from council?
Oh, just,
Yeah.
sorry. So Councillor McDonald had asked about the awning section, the height of an awning, and if a sun umbrella or whatever would fall under that as well. So 3 meters, that like 10 feet, I can't see one of those umbrellas being 10 feet tall myself, but I don't know.
And I will interject there. So There's a new section for awnings, to allow awnings to, to cover a sidewalk, cafe, patio area. The umbrella section, I don't believe there are any changes to the umbrella section. The umbrella section actually, so they don't in fact have to be up 10 feet in height or 3 meters in height. The umbrellas just have to be wholly contained within the patio area, so within the public barrier. So the 10-foot does not apply to the umbrellas. So sorry for that confusion.
Yeah, sorry.
Okay, thanks. Councilor McDonald.
So if I have a 3-foot height barrier and umbrellas just above that, do I not then obstruct the sightlines?
You could? Yes.
Okay.
But depends on, different cases, different applications.
So I mean, I'll just share my comments. Respecting that Joey explained that he's, prepared to take 2 feet off and leave it at 4 feet, and then the complications that come after 4 feet, and then understanding that, the 3 foot is just kind of, it's not a hard and fast rule. I'm certainly interested in seeing how 4 feet, and respecting that he's going to come in, he's kind of applied under the last one. I personally would like to see how 4 feet looks. I will say that I know you said you only had one complaint. I had a number of complaints, okay, but it was more from people who thought the sidewalk was closed because it looked like they just couldn't see past. So that, not being from Bridgewater, they parked on one side, thought they had to then get in their car, drive around because there was no sidewalk. So I think by lowering that down, not everyone, but most people are over 4 feet tall who are shopping on King Street. I would think that they could then see through. That's certainly my goal when I look at what I would want in a sidewalk cafe bylaw, is the ability to see the continuous shops and services that are on any street. I couldn't see it with 6 feet, but hoping I could see it with 4 feet. And so talking about some flexibility perhaps after going through another season and seeing if 4 feet kind of solves the problem. You know what I mean? Having a little bit of I know bylaws are quite often black and white, but there is some room for some gray. If the spirit of the bylaw is to make sure that people can see from one end of the street to the other, and that it accomplishes that.
So this season, because the application
Yeah.
came in beforehand, then it wouldn't have to meet the 3.2 or 1 meter. The other piece that wouldn't be satisfied, that next season would kick in if there wasn't a change, is the proposed amendment that would require 50% transparency. So of that 3.2 feet, it has to be 50% transparent below. So this would be solid, because it's the bench seating, so that that wouldn't be met either. So if council wants to use this season to gain an understanding of those sight lines, is that the streetscape still able to be seen and the sidewalk still able to be seen, and if you're satisfied with the impact visually, then you can look at changes to the bylaw closer to the end of the season. That would address both height and transparency, or you may wish to look at incorporating some type of a variance with guidance in terms of what would be acceptable. So you could leave it at 3.2 and have a variance of up to 20% or whatever council deemed advisable, and that could also deal with the transparency piece, because 50% transparency is kind of a hard line too, right? Because there's no gray to that. That's a solid number. So you may wish to kind of see how it looks, and then in the fall, if you feel that it does meet the intent of what you're trying to achieve through this bylaw, then the amendments can be done to either give that variance or change the number.
Councilor Tanner.
So I was going to ask a question about the 50% transparency piece. So can you go to one of the images and give us an example of?
of
Or do you
the
have
barriers.
an example of what 50% transparency might be? The concern I have is that I think originally the design of the, yeah.
So I didn't use any photo for this 50% transparency.
No.
Yeah.
I understand.
And the cafes? The
Yeah,
photo?
just throw up a cap.
Like this one.
The two that you had comparing
Yeah.
the two existing ones on King Street.
So both, yeah.
Oh.
So both of those, as I read the bylaw, the proposed bylaw would fail, correct?
So for the King Street beer, the planter height is 2 feet?
Sure.
I believe.
I don't know.
I believe
Oh, so it's out there.
around 2 feet, so it's close. But it would fail if the 3.2 feet requirement is, also requires this 50% transparency. If 2 feet is solid,
Yeah.
and then that last foot is not, then it would not meet the 50% transparency.
So bias aside, so my concern, I guess, when we developed this originally, part of the design was to ensure that people who were now, in essence, walking out into traffic or out into a area that used to be a parking area, and there's traffic very, very close now, would be somewhat protected should a driver careen, back up, whatever, into this area, into the border. And I guess my fear is that by reducing that transparency piece, you could weaken the structure enough, so to speak, that the public is no longer protected, if that makes sense. So then it sort of leads me to, well, if you're going with 50% transparency, why not just have it completely transparent? Like, why not just use, you've got examples of some sidewalk cafes, I think the Black Sheep Coffee Company, it's just wide open, it's just on the sidewalk. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, and I will comment just quickly.
Yeah.
I do know what you mean. As far as the protection from the vehicles, like that is primarily the purpose of the exterior. So if you're looking at the photos, that exterior barrier. So when there is a temporary sidewalk that is to be located across the parking spaces, there's that requirement for a robust barrier up to 1,000 kgs in weight, and so that is to lessen that impact should a vehicle enter into that space. But understand your point, there is that second barrier that could also act, so that is then protecting the patrons that would be on the sidewalk area. So yeah, I guess my point is the primary obstruction to maintain a safe space for pedestrians is on the outer edge of that temporary sidewalk.
Right.
And there's no proposed changes to that section. What we're talking about primarily here is the public barrier, which is on the inside of that temporary sidewalk that runs across the parking spaces.
Okay, so when you say public barrier, you're not referring to the outside?
That's correct.
Okay.
The public barrier is a requirement where alcohol is being served.
Understood.
That
Okay.
is the primary purpose of
Okay.
the public barrier, is to separate those spaces.
Delineate them a bit. Okay, understood. Thank you.
Councilor McDonald.
If a portion of the barrier is solid, why do we care how much is transparent? So if you've got 2, 3, 4 feet, whatever, that's solid, anything above that has to be transparent, why do we care if that's 2 feet high or 10 feet high? Is it still, because part of the intent is the division, but also my understanding a few years ago was that we wanted to put people on King Street, bring energy, make it feel alive, there are people there and enjoying having fun. So if it's transparent, we still have that, you still have sight lines, and you still have the barrier. So why is there a restriction to the transparent height?
To the height, because it's, as you see, like here, it's just, we want just to keep, we want just to give kind of like heads up to, pedestrians that, okay, we can see the other side of the sidewalk, so it continues. So we need just to keep this space clear, just to have a view over the sidewalk cafe itself.
But is there any reason that solid barrier couldn't be 3 feet or whatever, and then any transparent barrier can be any height. It doesn't matter as long as it's transparent.
Because we didn't control the material that people are using. I get what you mean, like we just control the height, but sometimes we don't know, what material, we can have. So we just wanted to have a better kind of like, I don't know, control or whatever, just to keep this,
It's like a mesh is transparent, but also not very visible for sight lines. Is
Yes.
that what you mean? So
Yes.
it could,
Yes,
okay.
exactly.
Okay, gotcha.
Councillor Conklin.
When do we typically receive applications for permit?
Around now, beginning of April.
Okay.
The permits can't be issued until May 1st. That's the first day a sidewalk cafe can be installed on the sidewalk. So most often applicants are getting their applications in around this time so that that permit can most definitely be ready for May 1st.
Councillor Cole.
Do we have any applications for new sidewalk cafes this year?
Sidewalk cafes that we haven't had previously on King
Yes.
Street? No.
Councillor Thorburn.
I support your decision. I think that was capped at 4 feet, and forget the 50%, because from there up is transparency. And most people are over 4 feet tall, so they could see. Right now, the drawing on the right, you couldn't see if it was 10 feet tall. But if the obstruction was just at 4 feet, that's going to satisfy everybody's needs. And the main thing here for me is the safety of the pedestrians and the safety of the customers that's in that building. So the outside things would still apply. But I'd just like to see that be 4 feet and that's it.
So I think what I was proposing was going through second and final reading. Our delegation had said he was going to bring it down to the 4 feet.
Yeah.
Because he's applied before any of the changes, so he's well within his rights to do that. And then see if, almost like Joey's piloting it.
Yeah.
And seeing if that works and if there's no issues. And then, to be fully open and transparent, if there were issues, our job is to work with merchants, whether they're on King Street or North Street or Aberdeen, to see, okay, if we have an issue, how do we try to solve it? The goal of the sidewalk cafe was to bring more people down to King Street. And for me, I like that I can see them, because I think then people drive by and they go, ooh, that place is hopping. So, I couldn't see that with the 6 feet, but I'm going to be able to see the top of people's heads with 4 feet, and people are going to be able to see that the street continues. So I'm hopeful that addresses it, and we can create some flexibility. But I'm also open to recognizing that if it doesn't work, we have to figure out what does work. But I feel like there's a compromise in here for us. But we have to work through it over the season, if that's making any sense. I know Joey's begging to speak. Just have to wait. Deputy Mayor.
Yes. I know we've had conversations around pedestrians and the sight lines. Have we done an analysis of the 4 feet versus 3 feet for the back-in parking here? Because my concern was the visibility for a driver that has parked adjacent to the patio. Do you feel that at 4 feet that it would impede the visibility coming out?
So that was looked at for the La Caseta patio when that design was approved last year.
Right.
So in this photo, it does show the Royal LePage car parked there. But with the width of that temporary sidewalk, and we're talking about like the height of the public barrier, it encloses that patio space where people are enjoying their food and drink. You'll also have the 6 feet of temporary sidewalk. So if that vehicle pulls out, and those parking spaces are very deep, so if that vehicle can quite easily pull out and see in either direction, or in this case towards Old Bridge Street, quite easily without being obstructed by the enclosure or the public barrier height. So that was looked at last year, and there were no concerns.
Okay.
So we were down there, myself with the traffic authority, having a good look at that.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions, Councillor Conklin?
Yeah, sorry. Just one quick one there, Nick. You mentioned about the barrier is necessary if alcohol is being served. Is that a provincial liquor law?
I believe it, I can't say for sure, but yes, I believe so.
Councillor Caldwell.
Yeah, so I like the idea of some sort of a compromise. I mean, the sidewalk cafe in question was approved just last year. I think it put an awful financial hardship on the owner to change it a year later. So if the 4 feet seems like a reasonable compromise, certainly for now, but then there's also the issue of visibility. So it still wouldn't meet the visibility requirement for next year.
For next year.
Right?
Unless council observes it this season and feels that it's adequate. So it, as the mayor said, it would almost be a pilot in that case to try it at 4 feet and solid.
So we would approve it, we would approve the bylaw with an amendment for 4 feet, and then if we chose.
Or you could leave it at the 3.2 feet and 1 meter, and then evaluate the look of 4 feet, because that's what we're told that sidewalk cafe is going to be this year, simply because the applications in prior to these amendments taking place, so they're under the old bylaw. And if you evaluate the 4 feet over the season and determine that that's meets the intent of what you're trying to achieve, then we can amend the bylaw in the fall to lower it or increase it to 4 feet and take out the transparency requirement if you feel that it's adequate to be solid. It gives you the chance to see how it looks and feels out in the sidewalk area.
Yeah. Councillor Thorburn.
According to my math, a meter is 39.64 inches, which is pretty near 40 inches. We're not talking a foot, we're talking 8 inches.
Yep.
Yep.
Correct.
Correct?
Yep.
Yep.
Just want to make that clear. We're not talking a foot, we're talking 8 inches. Not quite 8 inches.
Yep. So again, it's finding that compromise and working with our businesses to see what works. Yeah. Other questions from Councillor Caldwell?
Well, so I guess my question is, if we would consider making it 4 feet in the fall, and also reconsider the visibility part, why not just defer a decision until the fall on the bylaw?
Defer second reading.
Yeah.
Yeah, you could. I would suggest that we would probably do first reading over again in that case, because this would be taking away the transparency requirement would be a significant change.
Yeah.
And in that case, you would just not approve second reading, and then we'd bring the bylaw back in the fall. But what that does is it keeps the old bylaw requirements in place at this point, and you know, I think we're being told that it would be, the height will be changed on that sidewalk cafe. Again, that would be the old bylaw requirements that they would be required to follow. So it's up, I mean, it's up to council, the odds or the difference. You could amend it now and review it in the fall if you felt it wasn't adequate, right? Like, so there's a number of avenues you have.
Right.
Yeah.
I think by making the changes now, you're certainly, if someone is planning on opening up we have new restaurants on King Street now, if they're planning for next year with the sidewalk cafe bylaw, they know a year in advance, okay, this is where I have to go, versus if we defer it, then someone else may be in the same boat. Thinking, oh, I can, the old bylaw's still in the books, so I can go 6, 10, 12 feet high, and then they're going to come along, having built it, come to the fall or the spring, and then find out it's 3 feet or 4 feet. And so amending it, to your point, we can, if we pass second reading now, we can amend it up to the 4 feet and deal with the transparency at the time in the fall. It is 6 to 1, but it's
It's less risky to amend it now.
yeah, there is less risk for someone else going forward. Again, looking that there's multiple new restaurants on King Street. But it's whatever is the will of council.
If I may, if second reading is conducted tonight, and so, in like a month's time, this bylaw is in effect, one of those other businesses could come in the door in June with an application. So that's just another thing to think about. So if it's approved now, this evening, and second reading is given, then any new application that comes to the door under the new bylaw would have to be administered at the 3.2 feet max.
Thus avoiding having to have other changes done.
Yeah.
Okay. Other questions from members of council? For staff, no. Now, I know, Joey, you wanted to speak, which is very unusual because you already had your time. So I'll give you 30 seconds if you want to come. 30 seconds to come. Can you come to the microphone so that the thousands of people who are watching at home can?
Hi, everybody. Thanks, Council. I would like to say that the awning at 10 feet high, I cannot do that because there's balconies, so that is impossible. Then I'm not no choice to use umbrellas. So I have 4 feet high, then umbrellas at 5 feet. That's all I have to say. Where's the visual?
What was your awning at last year?
It's not 10 feet. It was 8 feet. 10 feet, I'm going on the balconies. Sorry. 10 feet, it's impossible for me. I'm on the balconies on top of my business.
Okay. So I think there's a little bit more homework for us to do.
And I'm willing to talk with anybody anytime.
Yep.
And I think that's where building a variance requirement into the bylaw based on the features of the building may give you that flexibility. But as you say, this application is under the former requirements.
Yeah, so, I think the variance based on building characteristics makes sense, because for you, if you can't go 10 feet because there's balconies in the way, well, then it's
And I'm
impossible.
still going to block the view.
But if,
I'm sad about that, but the point is, I'm going to have 4 feet high with my metal, and then the umbrellas are at 5 feet. So there's only 1 foot that you can see through. I don't know if that's fine with you, but I don't want to seem like I'm making trouble, but honestly, I'm still blocking the view, so there's no solution right there. It's not.
yeah, but when I look at the image, there's like, well, you said they're at 8 feet, right? So there is a gap, a sightline gap with the sails that you have.
Yeah.
But the umbrellas
So-
would be lower.
Right.
The umbrella would be lower and like 1 foot, so it's still going to be like from 5 to 6 feet is blocked. It's only from 4 to 5 that's going to be open. Well, 4 to 5. That's going to be a little gap. Just that you have a visual, that's the only thing I wanted to say.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. So
Okay, thank you.
I think there has to be some, in my opinion, there has to be some, a little bit of homework done to take into account some of the unique characteristics of, certainly on King Street, where we have buildings of different heights and different anchor points for different, whether it's awnings or where the sidewalk cafe itself comes out. So balancing that with, I do understand the need to put something in place so that we're not repeating ourselves next year. But knowing that council's open to compromise and trying to find solutions with staff, I think that's the goal here, if I'm not mistaken. So, and working through this season to figure out what's working. Okay. Are there other questions? Staff, Councillor Colwell?
I'd just like to clarify so I'm clear and perhaps public is clear. So if we were to approve this tonight as proposed, then in the fall, we would look at possible variants or
So
whatever.
what we'll do is I've assigned a task to staff to report back to council at the end of August with respects to the impact of the 4 feet and solid and look at the awning requirements, obviously, and get council's input with respects to whether the intent of what you were trying to achieve through this bylaw in terms of keeping those view planes has been met, or if we feel that there are amendments that are required to the bylaw to either change it to the 4 feet solid or some other form, look at a variance requirement, that type of thing. But it'll come back in the form of a report at the end of the summer. So that's just been assigned. So there's a trigger for that.
Okay. But thanks for bringing that up. That's yeah, it's important. Councillor Thorburn.
Yeah, I would support the 4 feet, but I think this is important enough that we should have the second reading tonight. And if we want to make changes in the fall, I could support that too. But my own personal feeling is that I'd like to see the 4, because we're only talking 8 inches. We're not talking a foot. I made it clear before. If you're going with numbers. So, do you want a motion?
If you'd like to put a motion on the floor.
I'll put the motion on the floor and we can see where she goes. I would move that Town Council for the Town of Bridgewater approve the second and final reading of the Chapter 212 Sidewalk Cafe Bylaw as presented in Appendix B of the document 24-061B and hereby repeal Chapter 201 Sidewalk Cafe Bylaw.
Thank you. Seconded by Deputy Mayor Fragier. Further discussion? All those in favor? Those opposed? Motion is carried. Great. Thank you, Santa. Thanks, Nick. Thank you to our presenters.
Thanks.
Okay, now we will go to Information Report, Energy Poverty Task Force.
Okay. Good evening. So in March, we brought an information report forward to you to indicate that the town had been asked to join the Provincial Energy Poverty Task Force that was established in the summer of 2023, so not quite a year ago. At that time, I conveyed that we were uncertain if this commissioned report that the task force was trying to get done would be happening, and it was. And the results have been delivered to the task force, but they are not yet public. In the report that you were provided today, there's a summary of the information. Because it is not yet released to the public, we've provided a summary of what was contained in the task force work, in the commissioned report where there were recommendations made for a Made in Nova Scotia home energy affordability program, as well as the responses to a province-wide survey on energy poverty and an overview of a summary report that the task force is going to be providing back to government and to Nova Scotia Power. So the ask tonight, and I apologize, it should have been a report for decision, because we are asking for, we are recommending that council consider issuing a letter of support to the task force that would accompany the package going to 3 different ministers within the current government, advocating for action to be taken to create a Made in Nova Scotia approach to addressing energy poverty, because it is not the results of the survey, the results of a report from Efficiency One, as well as our own research that we've done through Energize Bridgewater with McGill University, indicate that energy poverty is widespread across the province. It's not unique to us, it's not unique to pockets, it is widespread. The commissioned report from an expert that was looking at affordability for how to make energy affordable for a wider range of households
He's including, that was done by a gentleman by the name of Roger Colton, who's an energy poverty expert from the US, and he reviewed sort of the Nova Scotia situation and came up with 4 recommendations around how to make energy utility bills more affordable. So just an income qualified, like a discount on bills to create an affordable bill-to-income ratio, forgiveness program for those who have significant arrears matched to what a household could pay, a crisis intervention fund that would provide costs to those who find themselves in crisis, as well as targeted efficiency and electrification supports for low-income households, which is very closely aligned to what we're doing with Energize Bridgewater. And so really, the Energy Poverty Task Force is aligned to the goals that Council has already established with Energize Bridgewater and our Community Energy Investment Plan. And the solutions proposed by the task force are backed by this credible research. They've been tested in other jurisdictions, including within Canada. And so staff, having reviewed this information, do feel that having the town of Bridgewater leading the province with its Energize Bridgewater program, having that voice attached to this work would be of value in making the case to the current provincial government that such initiatives would be of benefit to take forward. And further, the task force is currently aiming to present its findings to the ministers of the Department of Natural Resources and Renewables, the Department of Service Nova Scotia, and the Department of Community Services. And they have invited the town to have representation at those meetings. And so as such, staff are suggesting that perhaps the mayor and a staff person could be in attendance of that to help advocate for, because we also need to start thinking about where do we go once Energize Bridgewater is coming to a close in a couple of years, and that this sort of activity, these sorts of interventions that are being proposed by the task force are aligned to where we'd like to see things go in the future.
Questions from council on the reports? So there is a recommendation that council submit a letter to the province of Nova Scotia to endorse the financing of the Energy Poverty Task Force and appoint the mayor and a member of staff to attend any ministerial meetings that may accompany the task force submission. Someone prepared to make that motion? Councillor Conklin, seconded by Councillor Thorburn. Any further questions or discussion on that? Question be called. All those in favor? Those opposed? Motion carried. Well, I'm voting in favor of going to more meetings, but it's important. It's important, absolutely. I should have mentioned when I did my announcements that I presented on Energize Bridgewater in South Carolina. It was as always, it stirs an interesting debate and questions from people about how we're doing things and why they're not doing things. So anyway, this is important work. So thank you for that. We're good. Did you have anything else?
I'll just say no, but the next item is also mine.
Okay, and then we're going to jump down to your item.
Oh, or are you going to jump now? We're going to jump now. Excellent.
Yeah.
Sorry, I was just following the agenda.
No, I'm the one not following the agenda. But I do recognize that while these are far more comfortable seats than the previous benches that were in here, you can stick around for the next hour and a half if you want. But we're going to move down to 11.1 if council's okay with that, to talk about the Dinner en Blanc that we received a presentation for at the last council meeting.
Yeah, so the request was received from Shanna Jodry, the detailed events and designs for a dinner en blanc, which would be held on the Old Bridge. And I believe they were originally targeting Friday, June 14th to have that event. That request of the town, it was an event that would see part of the sales and the tickets for the dinner be donated to the Health Services Foundation. So I believe the tickets. Sorry. Do I have to repeat all that?
Yeah. Carry on.
Keep going? All right.
You know me, I'm likely going to repeat it anyway.
So the event, I believe, consisted of having ticket sales of around for dinner, and that dinner would be $200 a ticket, and $50 from every ticket would go to the Health Services Foundation, or that's the details that were provided at the last meeting. The request of the town was to do a road closure that would see the old bridge closed. And as I indicated, it was originally for a Friday, and it was for kind of mid-afternoon till late in the night, so that they could have the dinner and take things down and then reopen the bridge, so probably closer to 11 or 12. At that time, the request, our Director of Engineering advised that that request would entail around $3,000 in staff costs to do the closure of the bridge. So it has to be, there has to be traffic control. You can't just put barricades up and walk away. We have to have a traffic plan. It has to be watched by individuals that have to stand at the barricades and ensure traffic does not go on the bridge. And our experience with that bridge is that the cars do try to go on the bridge. Now, it might be visually obvious at some point that they can't get on the bridge if it's full of tables and chairs, but we still have to have people stand there and do that. Since then, the request has indicated that the event would have to be moved to Saturday, June 15th. And so that lessens some of the traffic concern. Friday at supper time is a very busy time for King Street. It's probably the busiest time of the day and week in terms of traffic. So there was some concern about directing all traffic through one bridge to get to the other side, or the other side to get to the King Street side, and what that does for emergency response and just travelers and the detours that would have to be set up to adjust to that. So the request is changed to a Saturday. It still would involve a bridge closure or road closure for an extended period of time, and it would involve staff resources of around $3,000 to support. Normally when we do closures of streets, it's primarily for community events or events that are is accessible to the entire community. So we just did one for the food truck rally. Food truck rally? Or
Food truck event, yeah.
Event,
Yeah.
not rally. And that would involve a street closure. It would involve staff time. I think that we advised the cost to be around $2,000. But it is accessible to the entire community, this is a little bit more of a closed-off event where there's tickets for entry. And as indicated, part of the ticket sales would go to the Health Services Foundation. So that's the details of it, and as I say, the cost for us would be around $3,000 to support that.
So it is on the Saturday, or it can be the Saturday? It
Yeah.
can be the Saturday.
The other thing is that it was indicated that they could move to Vigeanwiska Park, although I believe the preference is the bridge.
Questions?
And what would be the associated costs from the town to move to the park location as an example?
We'd have to look at and see if any part of King Street would have to be closed off for access to it to unload, that type of thing. I'm not too sure if there would be, because there's parking that goes down.
Okay.
So we wouldn't be, probably if it was a closure, it wouldn't be for very long. Then it would just be renting or leasing that spot for the event.
And just a second, I believe last time we talked about the fact that the province would have to be involved in this to close the bridge?
We have talked to the province,
Okay.
and they're indifferent to it.
They're indifferent?
Yes.
What does that mean?
It means that they have no opinion.
No opinion?
No concern.
We can do it, no concern?
Yeah, because we would be managing the event, essentially
Okay.
closing it off and
good
We're
to
going to
know.
send
doing
them
the
Ed
traffic
Nix's
control.
insurance presentation.
That's good to know.
we would be the ones requiring the insurance and all that stuff, and also doing the road closure piece. So.
Councillor Conklin.
So let's say we're planning to have this on the 15th on Saturday. So there's bad weather forecasted for that Saturday, and I'm not sure what the deadline would be to pull the plug and relocate to, I think you said somewhere up around Cook's Farm or something, possibly. So let's just say that scenario happened. would we be incurring any expenses, like in just
There'd be
preparation for the Saturday closure,
we'd
even though
have-
we are not having it on?
We'd be using unionized staff, so we would be scheduling them in and then canceling their shifts. So I'd have to look at the collective agreement to see what the minimum call-in would be and how close to the cancellation time it is. So if it's an hour before, chances are yes. If it's the day before, no.
I'm assuming based on all the work that goes into putting on the event, it won't be the hour before. If it needs to be moved, it will be. Yeah. So that, yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Other questions? I know my biggest concern was the Friday versus the Saturday. Friday traffic across both bridges it's gridlock on a good day, but Saturday is dramatically different. The impact on the commuting traffic would be significantly less on a Saturday. Yeah, so that was my main concern. So knowing Saturday is an option is certainly one. Yeah, the other one is, and maybe it's negated by the fact that Health Services Foundation is the beneficiary of some of the funds for this, but we don't normally close town infrastructure for a business. But is it with Health Services Foundation?
It's still
we have a letter of support from the foundation and stuff, so
still a for-profit event. That's my understanding. And so there is a portion of a quarter of the sales is going to the Health Services Foundation, and then 75% covering cost and whatever. Didn't see the budget for this. I'm not too sure how much is profit, how much is, but regardless, it's a private event, so it does kind of step outside of what we normally do with road closures, is community events where the community can access it. So this could potentially open the door for other businesses to request street closures for private functions. And, council may want to think about whether, if you want to go down that road, putting some criteria around that, about when you would want to consider that. Because we do have other businesses that could potentially say that I would, that'd be great to kind of close the street off and have a Friday night event or a Saturday night event. And we may want to structure it so those requests come to council, so you can put that lens on it to say, is there a community component to this in some way, right? Because that's, I think, the intent of our past street closures has been, there's a community component related to it, certainly. I mean, you could argue that with the farmers market, there are for-profit entities that sell, and the food trucks are making money, but the intent is that anyone can access that area and partake in that event, and you don't need a ticket to get in.
Councillor McDonald.
I kind of struggled with that notion as well, but we represent a community with varying means, looking for different types of entertainment and events. The fact that there is a fundraising component, that's make or break for me. If there was no fundraising component, then I would not be in favor of any in-kind contribution. But that kind of tips the scales for me. The ratio of how much the town is contributing compared to how much is going to be donated, I think we definitely need to kind of tighten up and consider what we're willing to contribute and when, where, and so on. But the fact that this could also be a bit of an economic development driver, that it's really going to, I think it's going to gain a lot of attention. People are going to notice. It's going to get some coverage. I think that holds value for us as well. So when you're doing some kind of unique events, they may kind of step outside of our normal boxes, but they may also bring us some attention that we wouldn't otherwise get.
Other questions or comments? Councillor Thorburn.
Yeah. Does this have potential to be an annual event if it goes over well? Would it be like recurring next year and the following year?
Does you like coming to the microphone and answering that? Shanna's like, let us get through this one.
Yes, but not on the bridge. I just see it moving around.
Right.
All through the municipality, really anywhere in the South Shore. I had conversations actually over the weekend, potentially doing it elsewhere for next year already. So,
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
Councillor Tanner. Shanna, just sorry. I meant to catch you before you
No,
moved.
that's fine.
How many tickets would you have to sell to make this worthwhile, so to speak? And then what kind of deadline are you giving yourself or whomever, the organization, so to speak, to sell that many tickets? Otherwise, we're just pulling the plug and it's not going to happen. Does that make sense?
It's close.
It's what?
It's very close in
Yeah.
terms of like the deadline and like, I guess just selling it to everyone. And I mean, if we can sell 125 tickets, then it's definitely worth it.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay. But if you sold 90 tickets, would it still happen?
I
Could
would
it?
I would like it to still
Okay.
happen. Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah. Mhm.
Councillor McDonald.
Are you capping it at 125 seats, or was that kind of a suggestion from staff?
It can be more than that. I mean, right now I have 136 seats, but I'm saving those for some of our sponsorships so that they can have seating as well. Again, in terms of how this evening ends up will determine who I go after for sponsorship. So I wanted to save some of those seats. We do have the ability, as I said the last time I was here, the bridge could hold 456 people. So, I mean, there are fixed costs associated with that, mostly for the flooring and carpet that I would have to roll out. So I'm looking at 100 feet right now. That does give me a little bit of wiggle room in terms of putting extra seating, so we could have a little bit of more room to sell more tickets. If I needed to extend that, obviously more costs would be incurred.
Just to give you my thought process behind that is that if it's a fundraiser for Health Services Foundation, the town is donating $3,000 in kind. We'd like to, I assume, I'm sorry, I'm speaking for everyone. We'd like to see as much money as possible raised for Health Services Foundation. So if it was kind of a suggestion that was capping you at 125, I would question if there's really a cap.
Well, I mean, myself, I see this as being like 300 people being on the bridge, right? Like, that's the number I was throwing out there, maybe manifesting a little bit, but I also don't want to shoot too big either for the first time of the event and then be disappointed. So, if we go out with, a set amount of tickets, and then there's the possibility of saying, hey, we have another 50 tickets we can sell, and then we can move forward with that, which is my thinking behind it.
Fantastic.
Councillor Conklin.
So will the bridge be accessible for pedestrians during this event?
I'm seeing some nods, but I'm not too sure what the intention is to close off the sidewalk.
I feel that one of the sidewalks maybe need to be closed just for a partial setup. I haven't thought through all the logistics of everything, but right from the start, I didn't necessarily see the other sidewalk being shut down completely. And I mean, I will have staffing on site that day too, that, we can monitor that and make sure people
That
are
one,
able.
yeah, one remains open.
That would be helpful.
Yeah.
And if I may, the other good thing about what we were hoping to do is that there's no open bar or anything like that, so that would also limit, people wanting to come in and partake. And because of our dress code and being white, unless people do some pre-planning, you'll know who's obviously not part of the event unless those people, I mean, I can't force people to wear white to an event, but obviously that's the plan.
Other questions from council? And you said your Saturday, I know when you presented, you said you had a commitment on Saturday, now Saturday is open. So,
Yes, the commitments
yeah.
on Saturday have changed slightly.
Okay. For me, that's where I was happy to hear that, because that was kind of where I was stuck with the Friday, that's when I get all my calls. See them out the window. I'm on the bridge.
You get calls?
It happens. It happens.
Are you ready for a motion?
Yeah, if you want to put an open hand.
I just want to reinforce that there would still have to be an application made for the closure under our events bylaw, and that we would be looking for insurance and those things to be satisfied. So certainly we'll make sure that you're connected with staff to do that.
Okay, and are those applications separate from the ones I've already submitted?
I have no idea.
traffic application.
It's already been done? Okay, okay,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, if you'd like to put a motion on the floor.
Okay, sure. I would move that town council for the town of Bridgewater approve the second and final reading.
No,
Oh,
we're-
sorry,
yep.
I'm on the wrong one. My apologies.
I don't know if there is one for that.
There is a motion for this.
Oh, there's
Yeah.
one, okay.
Yeah, there's two motions.
Two motions, yeah.
11.1.
Yeah, there's two options.
June 14th.
11.1.
Oh, you get it up
Just
there.
change it to something.
Okay. I move that town council for the town of Bridgewater approve the in-kind contribution of approximately $3,000 in staff costs for the closure of Old Bridge Street from King Street to the end of Bridge by the TD Bank entrance on Saturday, June 15th, 2024, to enable the dinner en blanc, provided the street closure events requirements of the town are satisfied.
Seconded by Councillor Conklin. Further discussion? Question be called. All those in favor? Those opposed? Motion is carried. Thank you. Okay, so stay tuned. The public can stay tuned for more information on that. Okay, we are now down to the Hemlock Woolly thing. Adelgid? Adelgid. I say Adelgid, and I'm like waiting for someone to break into song.
Yes. Thank you. It is the Hemlock Woolly Adelgid, or as we have been calling it, the bug. So this is coming before you because when we brought this forward through the budget process, we had the expense for the first year of fighting the bug. The Bridgewater Hemlock Preservation Project is what we've been calling it, as well as the grant. We had been told we would hear by April. It is now April 22nd. We have not yet heard on the funding application. So the budget deliberations contemplated that funding from the for the Hemlock Woolly Adelgid project, and the communications from the province indicated an April decision. But we have no word yet, and if we are to proceed, we need to act. And so we needed to come forward and request direction about how we should proceed. So should we proceed with the work? And if we are unsuccessful in obtaining the grant, fund that $159,000 expense from the reserve? And if not, then should you direct us to delay work until we hear on whether or not the grant is successful? So if the grant is approved, then we would pick it back up and continue on. And if the grant is not approved, then to cap the project expenses at the net total that was pre-approved in January to retain our project coordinator who's been working hard at. We have received 3 summer staffing grants for the strike team. So we've been conducting, what is the term? I always forget it every time I go to get it, but it's like when you're recruiting people in advance of knowing if you have the grant or not. Anticipatory hiring, thank you, Kara. So we've been doing anticipatory hiring. We've had a lot of interest in these positions. We have 3, which is great because we've had other positions out for other summer roles that we've had less interest in. So we have received some grants. Council did pre-approve an expense of $31,500 related to 6 months of salary. So we would sort of try to make do with the grants that we have and the pre-approved budget and see where we could get should we not receive the funding from the Provincial Sustainable Communities Challenge Fund. Yeah.
So the question I have is, this is not just a bug that's in Bridgewater, right? So this has the potential of being an epidemic, wiping out hundreds of thousands, potentially millions of trees across Nova Scotia. And we've had to make a funding application under the Sustainable Communities Challenge. Like, to me, I don't understand why DNR is not racing down the South Shore, working with every municipal unit. Maybe they are. Have they contacted us? Have we talked to
We
them?
have been in touch with them. The province has received $10 million
Okay.
to address the bug on Crown land. They are working, they are trying to train volunteer strike teams, but when it comes to municipally owned land, there is not a source of funding. They've been really open about partnering with us on what they can. There's a lot of work, like we've had to develop our own sort of GIS survey app to try to input where the trees are, separate from what the province has, because they haven't created it to a point to roll it out across municipalities, but then we're hopeful the data sets will just get merged. So there's, we are working with them, but in terms of a funding stream to address it, there isn't one. They're focused, I believe, on their lands. So, I mean, they have released the biocontrol, so a different bug, that they call Larry, and they have released that in the provincially owned but municipally leased Riverside Park up across from Parkview. So they are trying some different interventions. I think the magnitude of what is in front of them is at a scale that we really, they're struggling to wrap their heads around the Crown land implications. They haven't really thought through the other pieces. We also have been talking to our regional counterparts because it is now flagged on their radar. So we have talked with some members of a tree committee in Mahone Bay. We've spoken with the District of Lunenburg staff, and we are ahead in our understanding and our assessment of the impact of Hemlock Woolly Adelgid in our town parks. We also have different risks being in town, having such a large concentration of old growth hemlock, the mature trees that will die and then will become, we all keep coming back to the insurance presentation tonight, but will add an element of risk to our parks and the management of our parks because of the standing dead trees that we will end up having as a result of the Hemlock Woolly Adelgid. So, being a more densely built environment, that, fire risk, et cetera, is something that is of concern. And we had noted that in several other reports that we've brought forward to council. So there are concerns. That is why we continue to progress the work, and we're very hopeful that we will receive the funding from the province.
That was my next question was, are your municipal counterparts across the province having just discussions? It sounds like not everyone.
Not everyone, but many are, and certainly it's been raised recently at the Lunenburg Queens Recreation and Coordinator Director Association. Did we get that right? Yes. And so Kara, she's here tonight for another item, but she's been leading some discussions with regional counterparts across South Shore. But we are ahead, so we're helping to educate them, and they're starting to ask questions and reach out to natural resources and have those discussions within their municipal units.
Councilor Coughlin.
So, if I recall, so this bug is traveling east, basically, right? Yarmouth, it would have hit Yarmouth first?
Yes, it hit Yarmouth first. Yeah. Yarmouth, Digby, it's coming up through the valley and the South Shore. I don't have the map, but if you recall from a previous presentation from Nikita, the sort of line of hemlock may not be removed from this area. It's basically like Kings to Lunenburg counties and sort of southwest, yes.
Okay.
There's also been, it's been identified.
Kara's going to join.
It's also been recently identified in Victoria Park in Truro, and so that's also getting some conversation started because, as probably a lot of people know, that's a very significant, beautiful park. Mm-hmm. So it's progressing faster than anticipated.
Other questions? So the Sustainable Communities Challenge Fund is provincial.
Yes.
Have we talked to Federal Minister of the Environment or Federal Department of Natural Resources?
At this point, there has been no funding opportunity for municipalities at the federal level. We will, of course, continue to, no stone unturned, no tree branch not looked at. We will look for all other sources of funding to assist with this, but at this point in time, there is nothing specific to Hemlock Woolly Adelgid that we can apply to. The Sustainable Communities Challenge grant was the one the province directed us to. We applied with an expression of interest. It was favorably received. We were directed to submit an application, so we are hopeful because of this is the result of climate change. The mitigation of this and the attempt to try to save the trees is related to, stormwater retention. It is related to a wide, fire prevention, etc. There's a lot of other, climate impacts from maintaining our healthy, hemlock trees that we have. The focus of our project is on Woodland Gardens, Glen Allen Park, Centennial Trail, and Riverside Park. So that's the start.
Other questions from council? This one scares me, terrifies me. It should for people across the province. That's a lot of trees. We just went through hell with forest fires across the province last summer. Imagine if there's millions of dead trees just waiting to be on fire. Anyway, I'm sure confident we'll get the grant and we'll move ahead with this. But in the absence of that, there is a need for a motion. Councillor Caldwell.
I move the town council for the town of Bridgewater approve the Hemlock Woolly Adelgid project expenditures for the 2024-25 recreation admin operating budget in advance of grant funding confirmation, and should the grant funding not be approved, the related expenditures for the Hemlock Preservation Project be funded from the town's operating reserves as may be required.
Thank you. Seconded by Councillor Conklin. Further discussion? Question being called. All those in favor? Those opposed? Motion is carried. Thank you. We are down to grants to organizations. Intake 24-25.
Good evening. So, grants to organizations for this fiscal year, 2024-25. As you know, I came before you in January to amend the policy, so happy to catch up on any of the changes as we'll go through this. We've been kind of working with our organizations to make sure that we're kind of transitioning folks into this new process. Not a ton of changes, but enough. So as you know, we're funding nonprofit organizations and charities within the town. We now have 2 streams of operational grants and project grants, and 1 intake period that is now March 1st in anticipation of the new fiscal year. We moved from an uncapped amount of money to a $5,000 cap for operational and a $3,000 cap for project grants, with some wiggle room, but that being kind of the outline. As a part of the 2024-25 approved budget, $45,000 is allocated to the grants to organization program. So for this year, the committee received 26 applications with a total of $122,225 in requests. There were 13 applications for project grants and 13 applications for operational grants. So just want to point out that that is quite significant, where before we had no cap, we now have a cap, and we're still getting a very large amount of requests. We only had 2 applications that were beyond those caps, one at $10,000 and one at $36,000. So it's not as if there's a lot of people that are going over. And so upon review, the committee recommends awarding 7 project applications and 8 operational applications. 4 of the operational grants are multi-year grants. The multi-year funding is still contingent upon yearly reporting from the organizations, but as we discussed in January, it will alleviate having to reapply each year for both the organizations as well as the committee, and it'll just be a check-in with the report to make sure that everything is still in line with the original application, and then going forward with that. So that sees funding for project grants between $1,000 and $3,000 to Blue Nose Coastal Action Foundation, Lunenburg Pride, Hillside Pines Home for Special Care, Second Story Women's Center, South Shore Transition House, Royal Canadian Legion, and South Shore Multicultural Association at a total of $15,000. And operational grants between 500 and 5,000 for Flourish 55 Plus Healthy Activity Society, Lunenburg County Wheels, South Shore Minor Hockey. Those are all one-year applications. South Shore Sexual Health Center is a 3-year application. YMCA of Southwest Nova Scotia, King Street Youth Center is a 3-year application. Bridgewater Curling Club, 3 years. St. Joe's Church for their working on sheltering unhoused folks for a 3-year application, and Lunenburg County Hikers for a 1-year application. And so council can approve the recommended grants and the amounts in this report, approve only some of the grants and refuse some of the others, approve a different value for any of the grants, or refuse all of the grants.
Questions of staff or of our esteemed Grants to Organizations Committee? Deputy Mayor Vergier.
I just had a question. I know you've changed the process a bit and doing like the 3-year application for operational. Do you think this will reflect us with what I guess it will be a council decision, but what will the future of this committee recommend for future budgets, I guess? Like, just adding up here for next year, we've got, 1, 2, 3, 4 applications that have our 3-year commitment. So I just worry about other organizations maybe not being able to have access to the funds.
Mm-hmm.
Is there any thought of that in when you're dealing with the application process?
Yeah, so part of it is we did 3 years in the original policy, or the change, so that they wouldn't be too long of a timeline. It would come up for renewal every 3 years and get a new application. And it is coming out of the idea that there were certain applications that were coming up over every year. And so in the deliberations, we did discuss, like, if South Shore Sexual Health was to, for example, was to present this application again next year, would we say no to them? Probably not. So yes, we can anticipate that we would be funding these, and we can always, like, instead of part of having the caps and having the new jurying process is that we aren't editing the amounts of money that folks are asking for, but instead we could amend the amount of the subsequent years. Okay. So in this case, this is what people asked for, and so it was, the 4 applications were ones that we could see going forward. And then, but if they have a significant change to the project, that would show up on that yearly report, and that would allow us to say, okay, this is a significant change, we would need an application, a new application.
So it's not giving, I guess, is it giving indication to those organizations that we're going to fund them next year, but we're not saying exactly,
it's contingent upon reporting. Yeah. So the reporting will happen prior to the deadline. Okay. So then if we do need to say, actually, this should go before the committee again, could you please submit an application? Because everybody has to submit a report anyway. So it's not as if we're asking them to do a bunch more work. It's if everything is still in line, you will actually do less work, and so it's less work for everybody, hopefully.
Other questions? Do we let the organizations know who didn't get a grant why they didn't get a grant?
We do if people ask. So we'll say within their letter that they did not receive funding, and if they would like to speak more about that, to reach out to staff, basically. So we, in the meeting, we take notes on each of the requests. The transition to having this jurying process and the scoring card that we created, it allows us also to kind of just see where the money falls. So if we have a scoring system for these organizations, then we can see that everybody kind of above this line is then funded, and because of the quality of the application and the quality of the project. And so so it's a little more, it's a little less, what's the word I'm looking for? So, yeah, it's a little less subjective.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's very helpful, thank you. Other questions? Someone prepared to make a motion? Councillor Conklin, thank you.
There we go. I move that Town Council for the Town of Bridgewater endorse the recommendation of the Grants to Organizations Committee and award grants for the 2024-25 period as follows. Project grants, $3,000, Blue Nose Coastal Action Foundation, $3,000 Lunenburg Pride, $3,000 Hillside Pines Home for Special Care, $2,000 Second Story Women's Center, $1,500 South Shore Transition House, $1,500 Royal Canadian Legion, $1,000 South Shore Multicultural Association. Total project grant funding, $15,000. Operational grants, $5,000 Flourish 55 Plus Healthy Activity Society, 1 year. $5,000 Lunenburg County Wheels, 1 year. $5,000 South Shore Minor Hockey, 1 year. $5,000 South Shore Sexual Health Center per year for 3 years. $5,000 YMCA of Southwest Nova Scotia King Street Youth Center per year for 3 years. $2,500 Bridgewater Curling Club per year for 3 years. $2,000 St. Joseph's Church per year for 3 years. $500 Lunenburg County Hikers Club 1 year, for total operational grant funding of $30,000.
Thank you. Seconded by Councillor Tanner. Further discussion? Question. Question to be called. All those in favor? Those opposed? Motion is carried. Thank you. Our next item is just for information. We have the Lunenburg County Senior Safety Coordinator report for March. As always, all the information that Council has before them is available on the town's website under Council and Agenda, and all of these items are here, including this report. I thought it was really cool that they're continuing with, it says here, work continues with the research and development of seniors' mental wellness toolkit, which I thought that was cool that they're working on that locally. And then they have a Senior Safety Academy at New Ross Family Resource Center that's on now and through to May 15th for anyone who's interested in checking that out. Next up is signing officer update. I guess that's just pretty straightforward.
We're just reflecting that we have the manager of finance, Kelsey, who has joined the team. So we'll be removing Kevin Keddy as a signing officer and adding her. And I don't believe there were any other changes to the list of individuals.
Someone prepared to make that motion? Councillor Caldwell.
I move the town council for the town of Bridgewater endorse the recommendation of staff and approve the following as signing officers for all town bank accounts. Mayor David Mitchell, Deputy Mayor Cheryl Fougier, Councillor Wayne Thorburn, Director of Finance Kimberly Hopkins, Manager of Finance Kelsey Hicks, Chief Administrative Officer Tammy Crowder.
Seconded by Councillor Conklin. Further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor? Those opposed? Motion's carried. Thank you. We're down to the 2024 Volunteer Award nominee for our representative volunteer for the town of Bridgewater.
That one?
Councillor Dahl.
So the Parks, Recreation and Culture Advisory had a very difficult decision this year, as there were 6 nominations for the 2024 Provincial Volunteer Awards. The advisory deliberated and voted for Mustafa Maynard as the recipient of the 2024 Provincial Volunteer Representative. The provincial awards have been recognizing volunteer services by individuals, teams, or groups for 50 years now. And this milestone event will be hosted at the Rath Eastlink Community Centre on September 18th, 2024. Mustafa, to give you a little bit of background, it was a very difficult decision, but Mustafa certainly stood out. He's known as Coach Moose to many in the community. He's been a coach to hundreds of local youth and a mentor to many. He's dedicated many hours to local youth basketball programs over the last decade. His love and passion for the sport and for the people of our community has inspired youth at Bridgewater Junior High School, Parkview, Junior NBA, and now his own local basketball club that he started called South Shore Lightning Basketball. He's also been honored as the 2024 Nova Scotia True Sport VIP coach, alongside one of his previous players who is also nominated and now holds the 2024 Nova Scotia True Sport Athlete Ambassador Award. I'm sure he's very, very proud, probably more proud of his player than himself. He's created many lasting memories, and as was evident by the more than glowing nomination letter that we received. He was very touched by the nomination, I'm told, and very happy to represent the town. We'll have him here at a future date, is my understanding. We'd like to thank all of the volunteers. The applications were astounding. The work that people have put into the community was just overwhelming, and as wonderful and we look forward to celebrating with them all over the course of the next few weeks. In the meantime, I'd like to thank and congratulate Coach Moose.
Awesome. Would you like to make the motion?
Oh, sure. Forgot that part. I move that Town Council for the Town of Bridgewater endorse the recommendation of the Parks, Recreation and Culture Advisory Committee and nominate Mustafa Maynard for the Representative Individual Volunteer Award for the Town of Bridgewater.
Thank you. Seconded by Councillor Tanner. Thank you for speaking on his behalf and enlightening us on all of the work that he's done. So this is fantastic. Congratulations to Coach Moose. All those in favor? Those opposed? Motion is carried. Thank you. Museum Commission membership appointee. Always nice to have Museum Commission volunteers step up. Is someone prepared to make a motion? Councillor Conklin, thank you.
I move that Town Council for the Town of Bridgewater endorse the recommendation of the Bridgewater Museum Commission and appoint Istvan Molnar Zakic to serve on the Bridgewater Museum Commission for a 3-year term effective Monday, April 22, 2024 to April 22, 2027.
Thank you. Seconded by Deputy Mayor Fragier. All those in favor? Those opposed? Motion is carried. And we are down to 10.6, which is fourth quarter strategic priorities and departmental quarterly reports.
Okay. So there's not a lot of change to the quarterly report since the last time we presented to you, because council just recently approved their strategic priorities, I believe in February. So it's just been a few months that of updating to do. The departmental quarterly reports are attached to the strategic priorities update. And really, most of these you're already aware of because we've been bringing them to you as updates. Just quickly, Exit 12A, we had a session a few weeks ago. The appraisals are done, and we're getting ready to meet with you in the next couple of weeks with respects to the development concept and what that should look like. Museum rebranding, that was a priority that council identified in January, and we've been meeting, and we're probably halfway through looking at what that transition will look like, and hopefully be communicating that back to council before the end of the first quarter of this fiscal year. The regional building inspection piece is on the agenda for in camera, so we'll have a little bit more of an in-depth conversation there. The investment attraction strategy, as well as part of Exit 12A. We've started the clean fuel feasibility and opportunity assessment work. We had a kickoff meeting with Clean and the province, so that project is starting and is one that I think that there's a lot of excited individuals, especially at the provincial level, at looking at, because it does position the town well in terms of understanding what the potentials are and the possibilities. And then privacy and data governance, just quickly on that one, we've started the recruitment for the privacy officer, so you'll see that out. So we're starting to get ready to do some more significant work in that area this year. The housing affordability piece, we have a housing action plan. We had proposed to implement that with funds from the Housing Accelerator Fund, and as council is aware, that was denied. So we'll be, if there's another round, we make another application. And in the meantime, you received a report from students a couple of weeks ago about some initiatives that the town could undertake, and we'll continue to work at implementing that plan. HR and recruitment and retention strategy. Here we've done some leadership training in the last quarter of fiscal year 23-24. Our HR director has developed a recruitment and retention strategy recommendations in terms of what we should be looking at and including in there. And so we'll start implementing some of that, and we'll bring the draft document forward to council in the first quarter to show you what some of those initiatives are going to be coming up this year. And that is primarily it since our last review. And as I say, the quarterly reports are there, and you're more than welcome to ask questions if you have them. If not, you can certainly contact me afterwards.
Well done.
Yeah.
Any questions on those? Hearing none, so I'm prepared to make a motion. Councillor Tanner, thank you.
I move the Town Council for the Town of Bridgewater receive the strategic priorities and departmental quarterly reports for the fourth quarter, Q4 of the 2023-2024 fiscal year as presented in document number 24-075.
Thank you. Seconded by Deputy Mayor Fragier. All those in favor? Those opposed? Motion is carried. Down to our last item before we go in camera, and that is the waste collection contract scope of services. Just a verbal update from the CAO.
Yeah, so when probably about a month ago, there was a report to council about the waste collection contract. We're looking to go out to market to give proponents time to, I guess, set themselves up if they were successful at the contract to get the collection vehicles, create the depot, those things. So we asked what your scope of service would be, if you want to see any changes to that. And council had asked that we look at maybe a little bit of a extension, get some provisional pricing on an additional yard cleanup, I believe it was. Wood and metal, sorry,
Yep.
wood and metal cleanup. We also asked that there be some consideration for a 3-cart system, provided the other units were looking at that. And so Gabe Welsh from the Joint Services Board did contact me with that and say that certainly they can try to get provisional pricing. However, with EPR coming on board, and we'll be looking at that in December of 2025, the Blue Bag program could change. So there's decisions to be made about who collects it, how it gets collected, what it looks like. So implementing a 3-cart system may be premature, because if it's collected by a different entity, the carts might not work. So it could be it could be a provincial-wide Blue Bag collection program that would look a little different than, perhaps look a little different than a blue cart. And so for that reason, he's suggesting that it might be premature for this round. But certainly, he did indicate if you wanted to, we could, but there are some logistics that would have to be determined prior to actually having it scoped out. Who's providing the carts? Who's going to maintain them, those types of things. So right now, with the green carts, we provide them, and the contractor might order them, but we pay for them. And we pay through the collection contract for maintenance. So regardless, he's saying you might not even want to go there just because EPR hasn't been determined how that Blue Bag program's going to look.
Okay, any questions to the CAO on that? I'm disappointed, but we'll get there. Okay, if there's nothing else, we've reached the end of our agenda. We have an in-camera meeting under Section 22(2)E of the Municipal Government Act, falling under contract negotiations. Can I please have a motion to adjourn? Adjourned by Deputy Mayor Fragier, seconded by Councillor Thorburn. We are adjourned.